Hello, Vince Poscente here. So excited that you've tuned in to our program on mental health issues for Olympians. Having been an Olympian myself, and also with guests on our program, Nikki Stone, an Olympian, also a master's in mental health issues for retired athletes. We've got Corey Hirsch, who's also focused on mental health issues for Olympians, and he was a NHL goaltender. And also we have Dr. Robert Neff, who is also focused on mental training aspects for athletes. This is just a fantastic program. I scanned back to the Tokyo Olympics when Simone Biles pulled out of her competition, the top-ranked gal in gymnastics, yet due to mental health issues, she knew enough to pull out. So we're going to discover some of these issues that Olympians have, and during the Olympic Games, you certainly are witness to these challenges they're faced in real time. And post-Olympic depression is something that athletes don't even think about, but will be an issue after the Olympic Games for many of them on various levels and degrees. Anyways, check out what we've got in the program here. Stay tuned.
As an Olympian myself, I don't remember post-Olympic depression ever being talked about. Elite athletes have this historically, they have to keep it inside, this unfamiliar feeling of fragility, no matter what iconic status society holds us up to. So before we discuss the personal nature of post-Olympic blues with our athletes, could you summarize this issue?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So really in general, it just comes down to kind of that feeling of that letdown after a high. And we all experience highs in different ways. If you think about the way that a drug user would come down, have a withdrawal afterwards. And, I know that, we're not drug users, right? Actually, we are, because we all have adrenaline that we have to deal with. And adrenaline is an extremely powerful drug. And many athletes, including probably myself when I was an athlete, was, addicted to it. And I think that most of us are along the way to that kind of heightened state of readiness and, intensity. And so, that's that being on, and we can be on when, we're given a speech or, any kind of a trauma where we have to be focused and we have to survive. And then it's after that, even like a wedding, you go to a wedding or let's say you're having your own wedding and it's like the most important day of your life. When it's over, then we tend to feel that sadness or that emptiness afterwards.
Almost like feeling lost in a way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
Well, Nikki, let's transition over to you. Now, we've been friends for a long time, but I had forgotten that 2 years before the Olympic Games, you had doctors telling you that you weren't going to be able to ski again. And yet 2 years after that message, you went on to take home gold in the Olympics in Nagano. Now, how did you cope with the pressure during that period of time and the anxiety that had to have come with that?
Well, there was a great deal of pressure and anxiety, but I had dreamt about winning this gold medal since I was 5 years old. I actually made my own Olympic podium out of tables and chairs and told my parents I was going to win the Olympics someday. And so this was a 22-year-long goal, and it's the only goal that I've kept my entire life. And it was that driving force that helped push through those pressures. It helped me be able to overcome this injury that 10 doctors told me I'd never ski again. It helped me overcome all the anxiety and the pressure I felt from doing a sport where I'm actually afraid of heights, and we're going to the height of a 5-story building. And so there were so many things I had to push through. And for me, it was always that gold medal. It was always pushing towards that dream and that goal of knowing that I could achieve this if I pushed myself far enough. And as Dr. Bob said, it was that drive, it was that adrenaline, it was being able to go out there and achieve something that really seemed improbable. But I knew that I could go and do this, and so it really helped keep me on course, helped me push through all that pressure and trying to realize those goals.
It really states, you've had some successes and dreaming about that. I know we have some video of that, you having those celebrations. And it really is, it's the culmination of you wake up in the morning, it's all you think about. You go to bed, that's all you think about. So that feeling of satisfaction, I guess, would also be in there, right?
Oh, most definitely. It's this feeling of accomplishment. It's something that you've set out for your entire life. But I'll also say with that is that there's this feeling of I held my breath for 4 years waiting to try to achieve this Olympic medal. And all of a sudden you can exhale. And you're really letting things build up and ramp up that entire 4 years. You're going out there, you have this goal, you have the anxiety, everything's building. There are cameras 6 inches from your face. You're going off this jump, you're waiting for the judges, you're waiting for the crowd, and you land this jump, and there's that exhilaration, that rush, and that feeling of, I can breathe now. I've done my job. I've gone out there. I've pushed for this many years, and I can finally take a breath and feel like I have set my mind in the right direction because I've accomplished my goals.
One of the things about the pressure of dealing in sport is the anxiety that comes with that, but you have a fairly unique experience with that. Could you explore that with us?
Well, yes, Vince, it's good to see you. To start, Nikki, that's incredible. My goodness, I can't even do a somersault, Vince.
I can't even on a trampoline, no less.
I'm in awe right now because Nikki's got a gold medal, right? She's got her master's, and I can't even repeat because I can't. It's like I don't even have a master's or anything. The thing that I learned the most at the Olympics, Vince, is that I always had the opportunity to go on to play in the NHL. So there was something else for me. Yeah. And the Olympics was incredible. But what I learned was watching athletes. Some of them trained for got to 10 years for 30 seconds. Like Nikki, that's what impresses me is you only have so many jumps and it has to be perfect or you don't win. So you've trained that long and that many years for one moment. That's why you see the tears. That's why you see the joy, the elation in athletes. So for me, my stuff came more so after everything was over and you look back at your career and you look back at the Olympics and you look back at everything. And then all of a sudden I was retired from sport in general. And you're never going to play again. So that's more when my stuff came along. But, I did suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder during my career, my NHL career. But during the Olympics, it's the last time I can remember being almost anxiety free, Vince, where with OCD just kind of comes on suddenly, I would say. I probably always had some anxiety, but it also helped me with focus, but ultimately it's also what brought me down. So people that think that this stuff is going to help you long-term, whether it's OCD or anxiety or that little bit, it doesn't. And I'm sure Bob can speak to this. It eventually will bring you down if you don't get it treated. And this is what I do nowadays. So I can take over this whole panel, Vince, because
you could. Well,
so I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you.
Enough attention.
Who's interviewing you?
I'm going to throw it back to you, Vince.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it. I'm going to switch gears here over back to Bob because, 2 athletes, 3 of us here on this panel. We kind of know that we're in the game. We're on peak performance. We want to perform at the highest level. How do you coach and how do you coach athletes to deal with that pressure so that they perform at the highest level, given all the kinds of the human condition that we each have to deal with at the same time?
I consider myself to be still an athlete. I play pro tennis. So that is very much my identity still. And so it's driven me as we've been building our company, Mental Training Inc., where we are really trying to do one thing, is to help athletes to recognize what their emotions are and to be able to get control of their states. And these states would be their, how they feel. So they're calm, confident, carefree, focused, and motivated. Those 5 states are things that fluctuate. So we've got to be able to recognize when something is out of balance and then be able to do something about it. And the issue, which all of you have mentioned already, is that when you go to the Olympics, there's going to be this elevation of importance that most people are going to put on the Olympics. But when we do that, that increases this perceived threat of what if I don't perform? And I've trained my whole life for this. So the nervous system kicks in and we get this fight or flight response.
It sounds like this carefree approach is really helps an athlete when they're dealing with the pressure at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we can get to this carefree place, like the opposite is anxiety, stress, pressure, fear. And when we go to the carefree place, none of that is there. Well, how do we get there? That's what we're primarily teaching. There's some breathing exercises we can do. There's some mindfulness things we can do, imagery, but really it has to do with how can we minimize the importance of this and believe it. If we can do that, then we can get to a carefree place.
Well, I'm transitioning now, all of us, to after this big event, right? Nikki, you mentioned, as a child, building your own podium. I mean, every day you wake up and think about the Olympic Games. Let's talk a bit about the transition after competing, after the Olympic Games. What was your experience there?
Well, one thing I think people would be surprised to learn is that after I won my medal, it was actually the loneliest time I've ever had in my entire life. And that was due to the fact that the people that wanted a piece of me, that wanted that excitement and the piece of the gold medal, they didn't really know me, and they were wanting to be part of my life for the wrong reasons. And the people that did know me were jealous of me. They didn't know how to respond to when I was feeling down. I was actually feeling lonely and lost and not knowing how I should respond to everything, because there was this feeling of I've worked my entire life for this moment, and now what do I do? And so it was a very lonely time. People were athletes and competitors that I was going against started looking at what I was doing a lot more closely. And because of my spinal injury, I couldn't do as many jumps. So I would go out to the hill and do a lot of visualization. And that started saying, well, Nikki thinks she's too good and she doesn't need to train anymore. And so there was this feeling of everyone's watching everything I have to do. I couldn't go to the grocery store without someone knowing who I was. And the funny thing is that I really didn't like that feeling, but then 6 months later it was gone and no one knew who I was. And there was this feeling of, okay, now I don't have that accomplishment for people to admire, and now I don't have anyone looking at what I am actually doing and praising me for this. And so I went through a very dark period after the Olympics and when I retired. And the funny thing is, when I got my master's in sports psychology, I had to write a thesis, and I did it on elite female athletes retirement from sport. Right. And I analyzed what would be the process of how you could retire and what would ease this process. And there were so many people that shared their beliefs. There were athletes who qualified for Olympics that we boycotted, and they felt like they let their country down and their family down. There were people that had gone through and had injury and weren't able to compete. And here I was, someone who had accomplished my goals, and no one thinking that I could be feeling down in those moments. And I'd done the research, so I knew that I should have a new focus. I should have something else to throw myself into. And still, I went through that really challenging time of feeling lost, feeling like I'm putting myself into something else. Why am I not feeling this exhilaration that I used to feel from sports? I no longer have that social circle.
Right. It's like this, your body and your mind has this expectation that it is going to do the next thing with the same level of intensity and passion. And I guess that's dreaming a little bit. But let's switch over to Corey. Now, Corey, you went from the Olympics winning a silver medal to the NHL. You didn't really have a huge transition there. But after sport, what was the feeling like after competing, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you my take. So it doesn't matter what sport you play. It doesn't matter whether it's basketball or like Nikki, or if you play professional tennis. We all feel the same thing. I always thought that, it'd be different because I played hockey, but we all can relate to the same thing. And I did go through a little bit of that, Vince, and I went through more of it after my hockey career. But after the Olympics, what happens is when you win, and Nikki, and you can attest to this, I'm sure, is that everybody loves you. You get back home from a country that you're overseas and everybody watched. So everybody watched the Olympic final I was in. 20 million people across the world. So you get home in 2-3 weeks, everybody loves you and it's great. And you're in the papers and, there's people at the airport to welcome you. And then it just ends. right? And it's on to the next person. So now you're left with this celebrity status you've achieved in front of people to going to a completely unknown. And it is depressing. It's very difficult to, it's difficult to grasp, and it becomes the elephant in the room, the depression afterwards, because people will shame you for having depression or anxiety issues post winning a gold medal, post whatever, because they're like, well, what do you have to be upset about? You were in the Olympics, you won a gold medal. Well, mental health doesn't give a crap what you did. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, a lawyer, a professional athlete. It doesn't care. It doesn't discriminate. And then, so we'll give you a quick example and then we'll move on. But there was a goalie in the bubble, Vince, and you guys might know his name's Tuukka Rask. He left the bubble, the NHL bubble, because he was suffering from depression, had some issues at home. Twitter blew up, ripping him because what do you have to be sad about? You make $5 million. Well, that's garbage. We can't shame people into not getting help because they have an Olympic medal or this or that, or they have millions of dollars. It doesn't matter. Mental health doesn't discriminate. And when you go through something like that, we have to encourage people to be able to get the help. We can't shame them because they have this or that. That's all material garbage. When you lose your mental health, you lose almost everything. And we need to get people to get help. And I had to go through that too.
You know, I'm sensing a theme here that there's this intersection of loss and feeling lost. And Dr. Bob, I call you Bob, how do we deal with that intersection if we're dealing with loss and the feeling of being lost?
Yeah, there's like a disconnect there, isn't there? I mean, but I think the main thing to be remembering is that, we can gain control of it again if we understand what the causes are. And I think that most athletes, we all don't prepare for how we're going to respond after we're successful. We're preparing for how to perform well. So that, I think, is an extra piece that maybe we can be doing some more training on, and maybe the athletes can understand that this is more of a, human condition here, that just like Corey said, it doesn't matter how much money we make, we still have a nervous system, and that nervous system is going to respond in a certain way to, this perceived threat, but also the stress and anxiety that comes along with whatever we're trying to do.
Well, we've all witnessed what happened with Michael Phelps, or the tennis pro Naomi Osaka, more recently Simone Biles, Michaela Schifrin. I mean, this is just example after example of, wait a minute, these aren't robots. So we're in more or less the home stretch here. And I'd like to go back to our athletes, starting with Nikki. What advice would you give, having gone back through what you experienced and also your master's thesis? What advice would you give, not just athletes, but every one of us in terms of dealing with post-event blues?
So you get there and you feel like, I have so many expectations of accomplishing something. And then when you do accomplish it or you don't accomplish it, it's still that same feeling of, I was striving, no one cares anymore, we're pushing you out of the way. And for me, I found that I really did have to find that same exhilaration. It helped me to go into motivational speaking, because I would go 50 feet in the air, and it was such a rush, but it was also terrifying. And getting up in front of an audience of 1,000 or 10,000 people and having to speak gave me that same rush and that same exhilaration. And then that feeling that I would calm and be able to help give to someone else. And I think the more that we can help others, it gives you that feeling of, all right, I took my sport, I actually am doing something with it to better others. And so whether you're at an event or within the business world, if you can take something from what you learned and you can share that with others, it really helps give you that benefit of knowing that there was a purpose, and we all need a purpose in life. It's something that helps push us forward and realize that we are all human.
Yeah. Another word that comes to mind is courage. And Corey, Let's talk a bit about that, because we watched Simone Biles, the courageous just saying, hey, I'm not ready to compete right now. And any other stories, Tuka Rask or Michael Phelps having, and yourself, the courage to say, hey, I'm having to deal with something here right now. Where does this courage come from, and how can we summon it when we need it?
Well, first of all, Nikki, you're my new best friend, because I can relate. We got to chat. And Bob, we got to chat too. Vince, I already know you. So, I'll get to this, but Vince, your experience is incredible to me too, as well. I mean, you went 130 miles downhill, and you, at the time, let's talk about courage. Like, you're like, okay, well, how can I get into the Olympics? And then you went and did it. Like, so you're asking me, and I'm looking at all of you going, how did you guys do it? Right. Well, when you become a professional athlete or whatever, or an Olympian, and you get in front of all those people, it's experience. And it's, we all know that with phobias and fear, well, what do you got to do to get rid of it? Well, you got to go and do it, right? You got to go and be 50 feet in the air. Although, good Lord, you will never catch me doing that, no matter how much fear I have of heights, Nikki. But so as far as courage to come out and say stuff, it's mostly because, for me, being a professional athlete, I can make a difference in the world. I have a platform, and shame on me if I don't use it for good. The way I believe. Now, other people are more private, and I respect that. But for me, myself, it's about, like Nikki said, it's about, okay, well, I have this. I've been in this. I've struggled with it. What is my next passion? That's how I got out of this, out of that depression. Is, okay, I found another passion. And my passion is to help people. And that's what I said, Nikki, to you, is that that's what it becomes all about. When you're in the Olympics, it's all about you. Like, it's great, but it's selfish. It's all about you. And when you get into another portion of your life, it becomes about, okay, well, what's my legacy? What do I want to do with my life? And then for me, it's about helping other people. It really is. That's what fills me up. Not my silver medal, not any win I ever had in the NHL or the Olympics. What fills my soul is helping other people. And that took me a long time to learn. So courage, I don't consider myself courageous. I consider myself someone that has learned that the secret to life is helping other people.
Right. Well, I can see everyone on this panel have that same heartbeat, if you will. Dr. Bob, let's bring us home. I mean, how do we bounce back? Like, how do we bounce back after this important event, and bring us home with advice there?
Well, Vicky and Corey nailed it. That was my number one thing, because in order to be a great athlete, you have to be very self-focused. And I don't necessarily say that it's selfish, but that's the way it seems. But you have to focus on, your food and your training and your recovery and hydration, and it's all about you. And so, and then all the attention gets, of course, thrown at you when you're at the Olympics. And so now you're back into the real world, and the real world has to do with us understanding, kind of who we are and what's really important, and helping others, working for others, with others, working in environments where you can maybe be with friends and family as well. And none of those things are typically what happens after an athlete comes back from the Olympics. So my kind of short list here would be to, can't overlook the nervous system. We got to know more about it. We have to know what the body's automatically doing and how we can intercede and modify it, because it, just because we're at the Olympics doesn't mean that it's a life or death situation, but the nervous system sees it as a life or death. And so we're going to have a certain response that is not necessarily going to be helpful in that moment. And so we've got to intercede. And so if we can learn to use breathing techniques and mindfulness, and especially understanding how self-talk can modify how we feel, then we can start taking responsibility, taking control more of that nervous system. And the last couple of things I would say is, and Vince, you're the master at this. Every time I talk with you, I laugh more than I laugh all week. Laughter produces endorphins. It elevates mood. So no matter what you're doing, if you can be laughing your way through it, you're going to be in a pretty good place.
It sounds like advice for all of us, like non-Olympians as well, that you know, just breathe and enjoy and be more carefree, and to Nikki's point, you know, having a purpose, and to Corey's point, you know, help others. All right, we're on the home stretch here, and we just want to thank you, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. We trust that the unique perspectives you've heard, along with the other McQuestion programs that we have and that you've seen on air, plus McQuestionTV.com or other social media, will give you insights that allow you to understand the news as it passes by us daily. As always, we continue talking about things that matter with people who care, thanks to viewers like you.